Hello students, in our previous video we looked into a method of hydrological routing where we were specifically talking about routing through reservoirs or storages. Now in this video we are going to discuss a river routing method which is commonly known as Muskingum method, and this is the most popular method to model variable discharge, which we often represent by Q, and storage relationships. So as we are saying that these relationships are variable, that would mean that they may vary in space as well as they would vary in time. But again, as we mentioned, that whenever we are talking about hydrological routing methods, we are broadly talking about lumped methods of routing. So we will use the properties that we would assume, for example, certain parameters that would remain constant throughout stretch of the river. And again, we will start with our linear reservoir assumption, where we would can say that, for example, when a flood is entering into river reach, so if inflow is greater than outflow, so our case one would mean that we have more water coming in than flowing out. So you can imagine that it would result in some non-uniform surface water, and we can surface of water into that stretch, and that may resemble something like this wedge getting formed. Below this wedge would lie a horizontal surface, as if that I is equal to Q, and we say that we can divide the storage at any given instant wherever flood is entering or passing through a river section into prism storage and the wedge storage. So when I is greater than Q, we have positive wedge, which looks like that on I side we have more elevation as compared to the outlet side, where the level of prism and the wedge coincides. On the other hand, we can also have that now that flood has passed, our Q can be greater than I, and that would result in a negative wedge. That would mean we will take the similar wedge but flip its shape. Now we are interested into the storage that this section that I just highlighted in red would have. So again, under linear reservoir assumption, we can say that we can divide total storage into storage that is present in prism plus storage that is present in wedge. Under linear reservoir assumption, we can say that storage in prism is directly proportional to discharge or Q that is coming out from here. We can remove this constant of proportionality and say that S prism is equal to KQ, where K is some parameter. Similarly, when we talk about S wedge, now this wedge is different from the typical storage that we would have in prism, in the sense that from side profile it looks like it's a triangle in formation, and sometimes this wedge could be fully developed. So we may have wedge starting from this point and ending at the end point, and you see a complete triangle if you look at any channel section. Another possibility is we may have some incomplete wedges developed like this depending upon difference in magnitude of I and Q. So we can say that the volume of water that is stored in this wedge is proportional to difference between I and Q, because it would govern how well this wedge is formed. Now, if we remove this constant of proportionality with two constants, one is K, which is same as what we used here. So let me use the same notation. I will use capital K. One is X. So X tells us how well this wedge is formulated, and its value typically varies from 0 to 0.5. When X has value of 0, that would mean there is no wedge formation and only prism is resulting in total storage in the given section that is under consideration. On the other hand, if our value of X is equal to 0.5, we would have a complete wedge formation which starts at beginning of the channel section, and gradually its height or depth varies to 0 as we reach end of the channel section that we are studying. And in general, the value of X would lie around 0.2, 0.3 in most of the realistic setting, but 0 to 0.5 are the values that it can take in extreme cases. So we can say that S wedge is S wedge equal to Kx into I minus Q. And that's what we mean by negative wedge. If I minus q is greater than 0, S wedge remains positive. If I minus q is less than 0, we say that it's a negative wedge and so on. Now, when we talk about the total storage, we can say our S is equal to KQ plus KX into I minus Q, and where K and X are parameters. Now we will talk about these determination of these parameters in a method called as Muskingum-Kunj method, which we will discuss when we go to distributed flow modeling. But as of now, we will say that, okay, right now we would know K and X for a given stretch of the river. So now after rearranging these terms, we can bring all the terms of Q together and we can say that S is equal to KQ 1 minus X plus KXI. So this is just rearranging of the terms that are present here, which again can be simplified as K into Xi plus Q into 1 minus X. I'm not doing anything special, but just rearranging the terms so that Q terms come together and I terms go together. Also, if we have to write storage at any time instant or index identifying time instant t, let us say Sj, we can say that this is equal to K into Xij plus Qj into 1 minus X. At any other time, j plus 1, which is next to Sj, we can again write K into Xij plus 1 Qj plus 1 into 1 minus X. So I have 1 here, I have 2 here. So I have to determine change in storage. I can write Sj plus 1 minus Sj equal to Kx into Ij plus 1 minus Ij plus 1 minus X Qj plus 1 minus Qj. So this equation that I am highlighting here becomes our equation 3. Now we are interested to understand, given ij plus 1, ij, kx, what would be the value of qj plus 1 if we know the boundary condition at qj equal to 0, that is at first time instant we know the value of qj. But there are so many unknowns. We need to have boundary conditions. So we can say that, okay, we know ij plus 1, ij and qj, but we don't know what is Sj plus 1 minus Sj. We do not know what is Qj plus 1. So we have one equation and three variables to worry about. And of course, if we give boundary condition, we can say still we have one equation and two variables if we know the storage at some starting point, and from there we can iteratively calculate what is change in storage. From where our second equation will come. Now, if you notice that so far in derivation, we have not talked about any continuity equation. So we can always bring that equation whenever we are missing some equation for which we need to solve for. We can say that St delta S upon delta T is It minus Qt. Now, if we look at the variation of I with respect to time, and now we are discretizing these differential equation. So if we are interested to know the best guess of It, we can say that, okay, if we are varying this It in interval of delta T, best estimate would be some average value at outside of these bins. So we can say that the best approximation of It that we can make under discrete setting, because remember this variation of I with respect to T is continuous. So we can say that, okay, here if we assume the smooth variation, we can say that It is equal to Ij plus T divided by 2, and so would be the case with Qt. That is the best estimate of Qt we can have from this variation of Q with respect to T as Qj plus 1 divided by 2. Now what we will do here, we will plug these equation, the values of It and Qt into our delta S delta T equation, and we would end up with delta S is equal to Ij plus 1 divided by 2 times delta T minus Qj plus 1 divided by 2 into delta T. And this delta S is nothing but it is change in storage, that is Sj plus 1 minus Sj, and this remains same as what we wrote before. So I will just copy paste here. So this is it. Now what we will do, we will equate the equation that I am highlighting now and labeling it as 4. We had 3 here and 4 here. So once we equate that, our equations look like ij plus ij plus 1 divided by 2 delta t minus qj plus qj plus 1 divided by 2 delta t. So this becomes our left hand side, and our right side becomes kx ij plus 1 plus k into 1 minus x qj plus 1 minus kx ij minus k 1 minus x qj. And upon rearranging, what we will do, we will bring all other terms on except qj plus 1 on right hand side. And so we should have a term of ij plus 1, we should have term of ij here, and we should have term of qj here, and we will assign some constants here. So we'll say that this should look like c1 ij plus 1 plus c2 ij plus C3 Qj, and this can be obtained because this looks like a linearly separable equation. And when we do that, our C1 and C2 looks like C1 looks like delta T minus 2kx divided by 2k 1 minus x plus delta T, and this would be multiplied by ij plus 1 plus delta T plus 2kx divided by 2k 1 minus x plus delta t times ij plus 2k 1 minus x minus delta t divided by 2k 1 minus x plus delta t into qj. So we are not doing anything special. We have just retained the term of qj plus 1 on left hand side and took everything else on right hand side and determined their coefficients. And hence we can say that this is just the linear combination of ij plus 1, ij and qj. And another interesting thing that you would notice, that C1 plus C2 plus C3 would always be equal to 1. So whenever you determine these coefficients, you can apply the secondary check that, okay, I have determined using such complex terminologies. But if this sanity check is passed, that would mean that your formulation or your calculations are right. Now let us try to solve an example and try to understand that what's going on here. So here in this example, let us say that we have the inflow hydrograph to a river reach, and it is given in column 1 and 2. So these are our column 1 and 2. So we have some index associated with inflow ij, and we need to determine what our outflow qj is going to look like. So I will erase this for sake of simplicity right now, and we are given that at first instant the initial outflow is 85 feet cube per second. So at j equal to 1, we know that value is 85, and the values of inflows, that is inflow hydrograph, is known to us, and we are asked to determine that what would be the outflow hydrograph. So let us try to look into how we will solve this particular question. So first of all, we need to determine qj plus 1. That is clear to us. We also know qj plus 1 is some function of ij plus 1, some function of ij, and some function of qj. Now what we will do, first of all, we will determine what are these coefficients. So in this case, we can write C1 as delta t minus 2kx divided by 2k into 1 minus x plus delta t. And after plugging in values, our delta t here is given as 1 hour because all the intervals are specified as 1 hour in the question. So 1 minus 2 into k is known to us as 2.3. It is also given in question, and x is given as 0.15. So this is 0.15 divided by 2 into 2.3 into 1 minus 0.15 plus 1. So our C1 comes out to be 0.0631. Similarly, C2 comes out to be 0.3442 and C3 comes out to be 0.5927. So we can say that Qj plus 1 is now equal to 0.0631 into Ij plus 1 plus 0.3442 into Ij plus 0.5927 into Qj. So when we are talking about j equal to 1, we can determine q2 as 0.0631 into I2 plus 0.3442 into I1, this is I1, plus 0.5927 into Q1. Now, if we go back to the inflow table, we know that I2 is 137 and I1 is 93. So all we have to do is simply plug in values here, and we would say that this is equal to 0.631 into 137 plus 0.3442 into 93 plus 0.5927 into 85, because we are told that our outflow is 85, and hence after solving this comes out to be 95 1 CFS. So this would become, our second entry would become 91. Now when we go to third entry, we will use I1 as 137, I2 as 208, and determine the next value of Qj. And that's what we mean, that we need to know what are the initial conditions or boundary conditions. I mean, unlike climate, here in hydrology or specifically in these small problems, I'm using these initial and boundary conditions interchangeably, but let us not confuse that here and say that okay, all these indicate the initial conditions in this particular setup, and once these initial conditions are known, we can iteratively progress and calculate that how my outflow hydrograph is going to look like. And when you plot these hydrographs on same piece of paper, you would see that if our inflow hydrographs look something like this, our outflow hydrograph is going to look little bit different. It may have a wider time base. So if TBI is TBQ is the time base of outflow hydrograph and TBI is inflow hydrograph, you would see that although you would perform calculation up to this point, you will smoothly extend it to the point where it hits zero or the initial inflow. You can clearly say that okay, this time base has changed. Also, there would be some attenuation of peak. That means once it passes through a long stretch of river, the magnitude of Q would reduce by certain percentage, and we say that this is the peak attenuation that has happened because of changes in storage that we are having. And again, if you talk about del S upon del T equal to I minus Q, if our del S upon del T itself is 0, that would mean I is equal to Q, and there would be no wedge formation, and hence we can say that in case of steady uniform flow, the shape of inflow, input and output is not going to change, specifically when we are dealing with time invariant flows. Now this concludes our discussion on lumped flow routing. In next video module, we are going to touch upon the distributed flow routing, where we will derive Saint-Venant equation and try to understand what it is trying to convey. Thank you.